roll call. There we go.
I'm
So,
here.
Hugh's here.
John Brown's here.
John Brown is here, and Frank James is here. Who else have we got?
That's it.
That's all we need. And I
I
don't.
tried-
Robin, did John contact you? Is he going to make it tonight? Do you know?
I haven't heard from John McLaughlin, so I would assume he's gonna come because he usually lets us know when he can't. I
Yep.
tried to call John Hymas and I didn't get an answer.
Okay.
And I
Great.
had heard
And-
that Imus was sick, had a cold and was feeling down and missed some other meeting earlier in the week.
Okay,
I also heard from Chris that he and perhaps his colleague would be here tonight at some point. I don't see him on the call right now.
they
And
sent a note, which I can read,
Okay, great.
that they, let me get it here again. Shoot.
You know, before we do that, let me just formally open the meeting. So I'd like to call.
Good
the meeting
idea.
to order. Yeah. And the mission is to, of the Chuckanut Community Forest Park District is to ensure that the entirety of the property is protected in perpetuity and public ownership with respect to its ecological, recreational, and educational functions, and to serve as a fiscal mechanism through which the district via tax levy will pay the city of Bellingham the Greenways Endowment Fund loan. This meeting is going to be recorded, and if there's anybody here that I don't see on the phone or whatever, I would like to just let them know that a visual and auditory recording of this meeting will be posted on our website. If your camera is on during the meeting, your voice, likeness, and surroundings will be publicly available and viewable on the CCFPD website. If you choose to speak with your camera off or by calling on a telephone, only your voice will be recorded. With that, I'd like to call it to order and welcome any citizens that may be lurking in the back that I don't see. If they'd like to make some sort of public comment, they're welcome to do that very shortly. First, we did the roll call already. Just let the record reflect that myself, John Brown, and Hugh Beatty are here, and that we form a quorum. And we do not know about the potential presence of John Hymas or John McLaughlin, but welcome them when they come. Let's first get a motion to approve the agenda. Did people had a chance to look over it?
I make a motion to approve it.
Okay, do I hear a second?
Yeah, I will second it. I would hope maybe that since we're a little short, that we could move on the sort of the paying the bills and that kind of stuff and get that out of the way so that when the other two show up, we can have more substantive discussions. Maybe.
So you seconded the agenda with that modification to move the bill paying and stuff to the front?
If
Is
that's
that
okay. with
correct?
you.
Is that a friendly amendment, John Brown?
That's a friendly amendment to me.
Okay, so let's go ahead and vote on it then. So all those in favor of the agenda as amended, we'll bring those things to the front. Signify by raising your hand and saying aye.
Aye.
One hand, I hear John's voice. We're in business. There we go. Oh,
John McLaughlin is here.
All right.
Hi, John.
What's he doing here? Oh, hi,
Oh.
John.
Let the record show that John McLaughlin joined us right when we were approving the agenda. Hi, John.
Hey there.
I don't know if you had a chance to look at the agenda, but it was
I did.
moved and recommended that we adopt it. And Hugh had suggested that we take up the kind of some of the old business first while we were waiting for you and Mr. Hymas to join us. And that was being voted on right now. You can, we'll take the vote as already happened before you showed up. So that's been an approved thing, just so you know.
Okay.
To move to that, let's go ahead and do it. So we have the first off, the monthly expenses and cash flow sheets. They were sent out by Robin. And what they show is the petty cash. We have about $2,967 in petty cash as of the 31st of January. The treasury report basically says that we have an unencumbered balance as of 1/1/22 of $252,927, ending an unencumbered cash balance as of 1/31 of $250,557, and we received tax revenues of $565 and paid out $1,031 in operating expenses, and $1,903 paid on our loan to the city of Bellingham. The current outstanding debt balance as of 1/31/22 is $23,083. Is there a motion to approve the district payroll input form?
So moved.
Second,
Okay, so we're approving Robin's wages, and I've heard a motion and a second. Further discussion? I'll call the question for accepting the treasury report and the motion to the district payroll input form.
Aye.
Further discussion, all those in favor, raise your hand and say aye. It's unanimous.
Aye.
Thank you very much. The consent agenda is a motion to approve the following payments. Following a discussion and vote, a payment on January 15th, invoice 97060 for Carmichael and Clark for $796.50 for their January regular professional services. Payment on January 25th, invoice 50308 to the Herrera Environmental Consultants Incorporated for task 1 for $1,605.24. And finally, the reimbursement of Robin Albro for invoice 130493927 from Zoom for an annual Zoom membership of $133.11. Do I hear a motion?
move
So
approval.
moved.
I think you beat you to it, John. You got the second.
I second.
Moved by Beatty, seconded by Brown. And any further discussion about those items? Thank you very much. All those in favor, raise your right hand, say aye.
Aye.
I can see all. Great. Hugh, did you raise your left hand?
Yes, he's a goddamn, he's a, you know what?
That consent agenda passes unanimously. And we'll just read the reminder right now, but Robin will send these items on to 3 board members right after the meeting, and they will be responded to in a timely way so that we can get a paper record of our approval and those payments being made. Moving back to the top of the agenda, would you then, Robin, since we had that item, information about whether or not Herrera was going to be here tonight, could you read whatever comment you've got there? Robin, please.
Yes, I also wanted to just say, because John is not here, that I will send it to you instead, the consent thing.
Got it.
Okay. Okay, this came from Tina. It said, "Thank you for the invite to tonight's board meeting. Since we are still developing the major components of the stewardship plan, we would like to defer meeting until the next board meeting on March 23rd. Since the past board meeting in January, we have completed a site walk with John McLaughlin and John Hymas to discuss our observations of hydrological connectivity between wetlands, trail impacts, forest structure, and habitat classifications, and criteria for classifying priority areas for preservation, conservation, rehabilitation, and restoration. We also met with Nicole and Lane of City Parks to discuss incorporating the recommendations of the stewardship plan during the development of the park's master use plan and conservation easement. We are reviewing some additional base maps we have created to illustrate site hydrology and soils connectivity and associated recommendations for some areas for trail abandonment and/or improvement. We are excited for the opportunity to be of assistance to the board on this project. please feel free to contact myself or Chris should any additional information be needed at this time. They said it at noon today. I was actually dealing with my uncle. So I did not get it until right before the meeting. So,
No worries. Thank you very much, Robin.
and I'll send that out to all of you too, so you'll have a copy of it.
Thanks.
Okay.
That's an informational item just at the beginning of the meeting to explain who's here and who to wait for and not. I would like us to, once we have our public input opportunity, then John McLaughlin, if you could share what that walk was like, I'd appreciate that as a kind of conclusion to this for the Herrera update. But before that, it looks like there are currently, I don't see any additional invited people except for Mensa.
Yeah.
And we would invite you to have your 3 minutes or
Yeah, thank you. I don't have any news to share. Everything that's happening with the steering committee, with the master plan steering committee, we'll get to it later. So it's all good.
thank
Thanks.
you very much. It's good to see you. And I like those glasses, man. They brighten my day. Having gotten by the public input part, we'll move on to the Herrera update. So John McLaughlin, would you mind sharing your insights that you might have so far about working with Herrera and about what the walkthrough is like, and maybe give us any direction or feedback about that process?
Certainly, but I saw Robin raise her hand.
I just wanted to mention that we do have the minutes and the election of officers that you sort of skipped
Oh,
over.
I did. I didn't even see that. Well, the minutes, yeah, we need to approve the minutes and you're right. So I apologize.
That's okay.
So we have the minutes of January 23rd. I wasn't there, so I don't want to vote on this, but everybody else that was there, have you had a chance to look at those minutes, and are they an accurate reflection of what happened? Any additions, deletions, or corrections?
I've read them. I thought that they were very complete in Robin's thorough way. I was satisfied with them. I read them earlier.
I would second my distinguished colleague's opinion of all that.
About
Great.
that.
Any?
I have a question on page,
Can't hear you, John.
sorry, page 3, the second paragraph.
Hold on a sec.
Hold just a minute, John.
First line of the second paragraph, where Tina said it turned out we couldn't do just one base mount. Is that a mount or a map?
That's a map. Sorry about that.
That is John McLaughlin paying attention to details one more time. Thank you, John. Any other additions, corrections, deletions that people think are appropriate? Hearing none, I would love to hear a motion and a second to accept this.
So moved.
Second,
Moved and seconded by Brown and Beatty. And any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I think that's again a unanimous vote for acceptance with the one correction suggested by Mr. McLaughlin. Great. And then, okay, we got to elect officers. Does anybody want to be president or clerk?
I move that Frank James continue to be the president because he's guided us this far with his vision of how this thing, very seriously. I would like Frank to be the president if Frank consents, and I hope that he will, and I think he should. And I don't think that there ought to be any dilly-dallying around with talk from him. I think he should just do it. And I also recommend that the clerk be John Hymas, as he has been the clerk.
Well, there's a well-stated opinion. Are there other considerations here, other nominations?
Hearing none, I think we go ahead.
Can I second that?
I guess. So I take that to be a slate that I don't hear any opposition to. Shall we vote on it or have further discussion about it? Moved, seconded. Any further discussion after moving and seconding? Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor, raise your hand. Say aye.
Right.
From the hands, it looks unanimous to me. So,
Thank you, Frank, for doing what you do.
well, thank you, John, for running the meeting that I couldn't come to, and thank you also for your kind comments. Now we'll get on to the rare updates. Thank you for disposing of that so quickly. Mr. McLaughlin, we would appreciate any insights or comments you had started to make. Please continue.
How was your walk in the woods?
So certainly, Tina, Mirabel, John Hymas and I all met in the upper picnic shelter in Fairhaven Park. Walked down the trail and then across the bridge built by Recreation Northwest across Wetland BB, as it's called, and then proceeded to walk a variety of places around the forest, looking at a variety of issues. And Tina was particularly concerned about, well, she wanted to address the forest management plan letter, in particular the ratings of the forest. And so she apparently had gone to a couple of plots and measured trees to try and compare them with the definition of what is a mature forest. And she was particularly concerned about the some definition that used the average tree diameter to determine whether a forest is mature or not. And I tried to point out that averages can be very misleading. I run into that issue when I was doing forest carnivore survey work for the national park, and they were using data forms that did the same thing, where you essentially used to rate a stand for the wood, the wood volume that could be extracted if it was to be harvested. So it's basically a silvicultural survey protocol, which really doesn't tell you the characteristics you want for carnivores or anything else. So those forest carnivores are essentially denizens of old growth forests. And so there you're really looking at big trees and big snags and big logs and a multi-layered canopy. And if you're just going with average tree, I mean, just say looking at the size of the trees, you could get the same value, same average for an old growth forest as you would in a tree plantation. Right? Tree plantation, all the trees are the same diameter, and that diameter could be the same as that for an old growth forest, because you have a few very large trees, but you also have an awful lot of very small trees. And so using an average is really misleading. The definition for rating wetlands, for mature forest of wetland, Tina was very familiar with and recognized that, yes, okay, that definition is based on the average diameter of the largest trees. Right? So that basically gets something close to, okay, what is the age of this forest? And I think she was using a definition from the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife for what is a mature forest. And that was for some reason using the average diameter. So she got hung up on that and was apparently in a couple of her stands, and I think in one place got an average that would qualify it as a mature forest, and the other case it wouldn't. And so I was trying to be patient, but I think wrestling over that is a big waste of their time. Because I mean, it would help to get a professional opinion from them, especially since they've worked with the city, to nudge the city to take another look at their baseline documents for their urban forest management plan. But for our purposes, I don't think that's very useful. And frankly, we moved on and spent most of the time looking at conditions, restoration needs, and that sort of thing that are going to be needed to restore the forest. And so we wandered around. I can actually take you on a verbal tour of where we went, but we walked around most of the wetlands, except for the big JJ along the Interurban Trail. We didn't spend much time down there, but otherwise, walked around the others, looked at the various wetlands, at some of the trails, the trail widths and trails that she, in fact, particularly looked at the trail that basically connects JJ to AA. That goes, there's trails that aren't on the trail map in the Nicings report that go right along the northern edge of wetland KK. And she sort of looked at it and said, this trail doesn't need to be here. It's redundant with the other trails. It goes way too close to the wetlands. So she's getting some idea of that. Also looking at some of the very wide trails. And she and John Hymas also recalled back in their younger days when these trails were basically narrow footpaths or deer trails. And now they're wide enough to drive a truck down. And so recognition of some of the things we've been talking about all along, of the proliferation of trails, the widening of trails, the loss of shrub cover, wildlife habitat, and that sort of thing. Spent a bunch of time looking at some snags. She was very interested in large snags that would also help it meet definition of an older forest. And we looked at some of the hydrologic connections, connections between the wetlands, some of the same ones that were identified by the Army Corps of Engineers when they determined that this place was under their jurisdiction because it did connect to the Patton Creek and therefore to Bellingham Bay. So we looked at some of those connections, particularly the connection between KK and CC, and then the outlet of CC that flows down Chuckanut Drive and ultimately to Patton Creek. And then the connection between JJ and KK. So looking at some of those and discussing what it might take to restore that. And then finally, we talked a bit about shrub cover. She had noticed that for similar forests, there really is not much shrub cover and many species are missing. They're just not there. And so you have lots of ferns, but and in a few places you have salmonberry, but very little Indian plum or snowberry or some of the other kinds of shrubs you would find in similar forests. Particularly if you look at Seaholm Arboretum, you have all the shrubs in considerable abundance and density and diversity throughout that forest, but they're missing largely from Chuckanut Community Forest. And that's where I had been puzzled about that for a while myself and thought about it a little bit and then sent my message to copy to all of you, except for our legal team. Didn't want to waste any more of their time. That may be a legacy of the geotechnical survey work in which the developers geotechnical team drove all over the forest. You can connect the dots between their test pits and figure out that they drove the heavy equipment just about all over every forest, and no shrub is going to be able to survive that kind of weight and impact. And we may be looking at 10, 15 years since that work was done, the shrubs just haven't been able to come back in. Maybe they haven't dispersed their seeds in, and maybe they haven't, those that have just haven't grown up enough to make much of an appearance. So we may be looking at a legacy of the prior development preparation. And again, that was all work that was approved by the city planner, the SEPA official for the city at the time. And that leaves us with a restoration need, an additional restoration need that we really didn't notice in our restoration priorities. So really, it is a little bit, but the particular need of restoring shrub cover and shrub density and shrub diversity to that forest. Otherwise, basically, we walked around with Tina, looking at some of the particular sites she was looking at, and her showing us her impressions of the place, what they're going to be working on. And I, in particular, tried to repeatedly steer back to what we're really looking for from her, are some of the things that we aren't sure the city is focusing on, or has hired the consultant. They've hired a consultant basically to manage the the public participation. But what we really need for this place is a plan for restoring, basically fulfilling all the restoration priorities that we cited in our letter, or are approved in our resolution of the restoration priorities. So that, again, that's where we can use their expertise. You know, we can say with priorities, but they can help us in determining, okay, how should that actually be done? What actually do you need to do to restore subsurface and surface flows to, between wetlands? And what would work to narrow trails, to close trails, and then to keep them that way, right? So we talked a bit about what do you do to dissuade public from continuing to use trails that have been closed. And she talked, a bit about, in other places, she put a bunch of roses in. They might not do so well in a forest. And so there are other kinds of plants that could do a good job if they're planted in sufficient density to convince people they don't want to go that way. They want to stick to the official trails. And then talked a little bit about concern of public access. And she was really concerned about the connection, basically where Wetland CC connects with Chuckanut Drive right near 16th Street. She'd gotten feedback from the neighbors of the development off of 16th Street. They don't want the access to the 16th Street to be any kind of an official trail for obvious reasons. They don't want people parking in their neighborhood. What? But they do want to retain an unofficial trail to provide access. Tina didn't think that providing parking or any other kind of major access at the outlet of CC would be a good idea. It would be very dangerous. It's just below the crest of the hill. And so be a lot of hazards with traffic coming over the hill right towards where people are parking or pulling out or doing something like that. It's also problematic because that is, you have flowing water there and all kinds of potential impacts and conflicts between trying to restore hydrology and visitor use. And we pretty much all agreed that the access that's currently being used, basically the gravel space at the crest of the hill right across from Viewcrest would be appropriate. John Hymas mentioned that one of the major points of public input was creating a loop trail, right? So we have a major trail connecting the endpoints of that loop so that people can walk into a loop. And right now, there's a missing part there where you have the Viewcrest access, and then you have this trail that comes out also to Chuckanut Drive, right next to Wetland CC and next to 16th Street. And you could connect those with smaller trails that go across the wetlands, but it actually would be a whole lot less impact if we routed a trail parallel to Chuckanut Drive, perhaps in the forest or perhaps outside of it, that takes you along terrestrial soils and doesn't impact wetlands. So that was another idea that they may be working on. Frank, you're muted.
Yes, thanks. I had a couple of questions. One is that I was concerned with the city's interest in using the old roadway as the major trail through it, how that might impact hydrology or the potential for restoration. Is that something that seems like a good idea? Is that something that might not be a good idea given the proximity to the wetlands and
the old roadway, the one that goes between JJ and CC?
Yeah,
Yep.
They had this idea, I think, that in our committee meetings that they would utilize what used to be a road and redevelop it as the main kind of through trail. The idea that there should be a trail from kind of Fairhaven Park over to the interurban. But at least it seemed to me like it went very close to the wetlands, and it might be more appropriate to move that to a different location.
that trail basically the entire way until it diverts off to wetlands AA is entirely in wetland buffer. She did mention that the wetland buffers have changed since those that were reflected in Ann Eisinger's, or the city's maps that Ann Eisinger put in her report. Our critical areas ordinance has changed a little bit, so wetland buffer widths depend on adjacent land use or land use intensity and that sort of thing, so that they're now, I guess, 100-foot buffers instead of the 150-foot buffers on the map. But still, that point is well taken. We did stop at what she called the RV park. You know, the big open area has become open between KK and JJ. And we talked a little bit about, again, restoring surface and subsurface flows. They didn't get into talking about a bridge or a boardwalk, and then any excavation of the compacted soil that, you know, basically the road. They didn't get into that in too much detail. She did talk quite a bit about the area, the complex of AA, AX, and AY. And in particular, concern of the trails that come off of the ridge at the north of the property that then descend into that wetland area. And she was very concerned that that's a natural congregation point, both because of its geographic location and because it's open. And so people may gather in, you know, open areas, particularly in the summer. And she was very concerned about all of that. And when we were there, it's been fairly dry, but the conditions were still quite wet there. And getting in there, you'd have to cross some fairly wet places, and people have been walking out. And so you basically have the classic issue of a widening footprint where people are trying to walk around the mud, and it just gets wider and wider. And so she was being fairly creative about ways to address the interest and need for people to have gathering spots, but avoid those environmental impacts of that particular location.
The other related question I had, John, was that I think when another presentation was made to the steering committee, it was quite clear that the construction of over wetland trails was very expensive. I think it was like $1,000 a foot. So I was wondering if they had thoughts or planned to look into those cost impacts and some plan for how to manage it in the long term.
They hadn't talked about that too much. She was mostly talking about avoiding wetlands.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There are a couple of places where, well, the current trail system does cross wetlands in a few places. We walked along those, and she was of the opinion that we ought to get rid of those and come up with trails that avoid those conflicts. And she didn't talk about cost, but they did the same thing.
Yeah, John, can I interrupt for a sec?
Yeah.
Just to say that at the last steering committee meeting, when we had, Nicole or Lane ran us through the PowerPoint presentation. What surprised me, which I didn't know about until then, and I'm telling you because maybe you and the Herrera people don't know, that the city Parks Department is planning with Recreation Northwest to do an open teaching area that's outside of our forest, that is at the 18th Street Trail Junction. You know, they cleared a bunch of blackberry out, and it's just a gentle slope, and it's a perfect place to put an outdoor school kind of setup with benches or, you know, some kind of, anyway, it's a gathering place.
That'd be great. And that's off of 18th Street?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, kind of
right.
across the trail to the north from the stone benches.
Yeah, it's right where those stone benches are. Pretty
Yeah.
distinctive spot.
Yeah, right near there.
Yeah.
So the worries about the wetland at AY and AA is probably not gonna happen. And besides that, that's also very close to the gravel pit. So I think the gravel pit would be a meeting place before the wetland. also.
That'd be
Thanks,
great.
Vince.
Yeah, again, addressing the conflicts with the current current trail system and wetlands is going to take some thoughtful design work for the trail network. It's something some of my students have worked on, and some of those designs have been well received by the public and others not. It's really going to come to a head when the city starts trying to resolve some of those conflicts. Frank, as you mentioned, the major trail that goes down to the interurban trail, that crosses a bunch of wet spots, right adjacent to some wetlands and even crossing a wetland at one point. Bridging, connecting, forking off of that trail are a number of other trails that do cross wetlands. And so those are problematic. And then you have the current trail that bisects wetland CC. And that's right now is a popular trail, and that's a problem. Then the wetland or the trail that again connects to Chuckanut Drive at the outlet of CC. That I don't think is that much of a problem because it's by then it's a stream, and so a fairly small bridge will work just fine as long as it's wide enough so it doesn't exclude other users. I think the bigger issue there is whether or how you connect that access point with the primary access point at the crest of the hill.
I guess my question, John, was just that it seems like we want to keep trails out of wetlands. At the same time, we want to have access to those wetlands. It seems like some plan that would have some sort of access trail, maybe even a dead end trail that went into the wetlands, was elevated and allowed people to experience the wetlands, but didn't impact them. I just think that that's something I would like to see as a goal. It's an incredibly beautiful place. And I think to see those wetlands in action sort of would be a desirable thing without impacting the wetland. And that's as I said, I think that's the sort of $1,000 a foot sort of estimate they made. Although interesting, most of that cost was regulatory, not actually construction. It was really the component that there may be some ability to be somewhat creative with in terms of bringing the cost down some. The other question, John, was what about the ditch, the big ditch that was dug to drain those wetlands a long time ago? Is there some consideration of trying to rehabilitate or to somehow provide more traditional ecology in that area, or is that something that got addressed?
Because that's not in the forest property proper, we never got over there.
Yeah.
Whenever I take a class there, I take them to that ditch.
Yeah.
And they haven't acted on it, but every group has talked about midnight killing parties.
Yeah. Can I just add, I walked through the park, through the forest, maybe 2 weeks ago before this cold weather. And I walked on the trail that goes from the gravel pit to the main road, and it crosses KK, wetland KK. There's a new footbridge there that wasn't there last fall. And it was pretty long. It was like, I wonder if anyone knows who put it there. And
wait, so you're talking about from the gravel pit to wetland KK?
Yeah, through wetland KK that goes to the main trail. Yeah, there's a new boardwalk there, and maybe you didn't walk through there and didn't notice it, but it's kind of one of the places I like to walk when I go through there. Anyway,
No, we didn't get to that part of KK. We walked it a couple different parts of KK. We didn't get to that particular place.
Yeah, and the other thing I wanted to say is that it sounds like what you need for Herrera to focus on is the stuff that will be in phase 2 of the city's master plan. Like the master plan process is being described as having phase 1 and phase 2, and I don't know, maybe a phase 3, but a phase 1 is just a quick and dirty signage and making a main trail. And phase 2 is designing a trail network and doing the bridges and, really studying how the trails are ultimately going to be.
Wait, so they're gonna,
Well,
it sounds like those are backwards.
The master plan process is being designed to have a phase 1 action plan and then a phase 2 action plan.
But how can you make a trail if you don't have a trail network design yet?
Well, there might be a general trail network design, but that work won't happen until phase 2. And phase 1 is what will happen first. And it'll be the easy stuff. So just so you know that that's how the steering committee has organized the.
Okay, I'm very interested. This is the first I've heard of it, so I'm really interested.
Well, it seems to me that what you commissioners are focusing on is more the phase 2 stuff.
Right.
As far as,
I'm still,
replanting the undergrowth and stuff like that.
yeah, I'm still not quite clear on what phase. I mean, I understand signage, but I thought one of the main things we've been waiting for all along is the trail network design.
Right.
And so I have a hard time understanding what you mean by making a trail when.
Well, I don't know for sure how much detail phase 1 is going to have. That's all I'm saying.
Okay.
That a lot of the detail will be in phase 2.
One of the dangers, I think, for us is that the city would have too general a plan without enough detail, and that they would do what was easy and defer what was hard and expensive, and that never get done. I mean, that's, I think, the biggest danger in what's being proposed by far. There are many competing interests in the city for park money. One of the things that I hope that to request of them, or maybe even demand of them, is that they have some plan that's reasonable and a plan for funding it, not just someday maybe. I think we almost have an obligation to ask for that.
That's part of why the forest is in the condition it is now.
Right.
Is, it became public property, and the city, to be entirely fair, they didn't have the money, the budget to deal with it, and to initiate master planning right then and actually start doing that work. And so in the intervening decade, people have been using it. And so we've had all these impacts, and these impacts are going to continue. And the longer we wait, the worse it's going to get.
Yes. Again, I think that's an issue we need to raise very directly with the city specifically. That's kind of on us, I think.
And I think it's going to be beneficial for users. I mean, people don't want to walk through mud, and people don't want to get lost. And so we need to do the work, or the city needs to do the work, to decide what is going to be the trail alignment. Where are trails going to be? And then that's going to determine, okay, which trails need to be closed, which trails need to be narrowed, which trails need to be repositioned, which trails need to be improved. Where are we going to put any of these bridges or crossings? And then that, once you know what the quote sacrifice zones are, the use zones, or where the actual trails are going to be, then that determines, okay, where are the restoration sites you're going to need to work on? So it seems like this part that Vincent is describing as phase 2 really needs to come first. I mean, unless you want to simply put in signs that say you are here to help people from getting lost.
No, we were talking about the signs being educational also, to teach people why their dogs should be on the leash, and what the ramifications of that.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm just concerned that just thinking of what ultimately needs to get done and making sure it gets done to address Frank's concern. is you really have to know what your design is before you can start working on pieces of it.
I think that's why we hired Herrera, and that's what we need that document to do. That's my thought.
Except the city has taken ownership of what's the trail design going to look like? Where are the trails going to be?
No, they don't get to do that. We
Okay.
get to have input on that, and this is how we and where and when we get to have input on it.
Okay.
That's my impression. That's my vision, at least, is that that's
Then I think a productive use of Herrera's expertise would be to, and they already have it, but to point them to the city's draft trail design map, which has a lot of question marks on it, and have them, based on their considerable expertise on all the issues related to trails, how would they recommend resolving these uncertainties, these question marks? What would they recommend the trail alignment to be? Again, considering all these things up front, that it sounds like the master planning process is pushing to later. And again, I think that would be much more useful than having Tina or anyone else spin their wheels on measuring tree diameters.
And so did you want to say something? Did you have your hand up?
I wanted to say something.
Okay,
No, I was done.
you,
I've been
yeah.
reading this evaluation of the Fairhaven Park entrance plan where they tore down the old gate and the old brick stuff and what they were going to do to replace it. And they have all these different, they have a grant or budget for 78,000 or something to redo it. And part of their plan is to put a sign up on Chuckanut Drive down a little bit south of Viewcrest that says Chuckanut Community Forest, Fairhaven Park, right turns, up ahead, So we're going to be seen from the south, at least pretty early on here from the touristas, that's the way to get in there, is in through Fairhaven Park, the proper entrance. And the proper entrance, they had quite a few old historical photos that you could look at. And back when before they had the wood brick gate thing, they had a gate made of cedar logs that they had logged, I guess, on site maybe, but they were big cedars, and they had this whole thing that you come through, and you could see in the background quite a bit of older forest that I thought, well, that's about where we are today. And so some of those trees look pretty old there, even back into the turn of the century there. So that'd be an interesting photo to, when we talk about diameter of trees and stuff. And they also said that they used to have at the entrance to the Fairhaven Park, the biggest flagpole in the country. And it held a giant flag that was a cedar flagpole. So anyway, if you haven't seen that, look up the Fairhaven Park plan. It's interesting to evaluate our forest a bit.
Thanks, Hugh. Yeah, I looked at that. To me, it's really heartbreaking because I love what they took down, and they preserved it with the possibility of replacing it. And for some reason, to replace it is $285,000 or something. I don't know how 2 brick columns cost $285,000, but I guess they do.
And I looked at the sign that they have up there, the temporary one. It's been up since 96 or no, 2006. And it's good, it's visible. You can see that better than the ones that they have mocked up to possibly put in front. And the only thing they need to do is, if you notice the walkway, the white walkway, they need to repaint that a bit. It's fading out. somebody get hit, and maybe they should put a little arrow in and an arrow out too on the ground. But anyway,
John, I have one other question, and this is my last one. There is a substantial chunk of bamboo there, a small, there's a little short bamboo, but bamboo nonetheless. Did that get looked at or talked about at all?
We didn't get into that at all.
Seems like it'll be a major challenge to actually get rid of that stuff permanently. It sounds like a very difficult process from the discussion we had when the weed folks came and met with us. Is
And
there?
the location you're talking about is where?
It's kind of in the middle of nowhere. It's sort of back. I have the map somewhere. I can get it to you. But there's actually a map that they have, and they've got it marked on there. And it's a fairly large area of bamboo in there, actually, which I hadn't realized at all. It's not the tall bamboo. It's fairly shrubby bamboo. But it seems like it was particularly difficult to get rid of. And how it got there and why it's there is a kind of a mystery, because it's right it's sort of, there aren't a lot of trails around it, but it's in the I think on the north west end of things, in the area that isn't really, there's not many trails there. But I just wondered if they talked about it. That seems like one of the sorts of challenges for restoration that would be substantial. Well, we spent a fair amount of time on this, but it's actually one of the main things we have to do. And we've kind of intermixed it with some of the master planning update activity. But I think it might be good to, if there isn't more discussion, to move on to that master planning update now. Is that more discussion or questions of John or thoughts about this process? John, I really appreciate you meeting with them, and I hope you can continue to have an ongoing dialogue with them. And I'll reach out to them too and have more of a dialogue. They seem quite busy, but I think we also need to have a hand in shaping what happens. And I think the concerns expressed tonight are concerns that we should definitely get to them.
Again, if we want them to work on trail design, that's not currently on, I think, in their scope of work or their plan. So that would be a course change, and we ought to be pretty clear about it.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're going to ask the public. So can I just say that looking at this draft master plan spreadsheet that we looked at our last steering committee meeting, and that I think will be public, there is a page on trails to improve and trails to remove and whatever, and the public's opinion will be solicited on, trail issues, wayfinding and access and all that before it gets to dogs and bikes and every other thing. But I think after the public gets to weigh in, then I think the real work will begin. And that's where I hope Herrera will hit the ground running, and it sounds like this public engagement is supposed to happen in 2 weeks or the middle of March. And your agenda says it's March 16th. I don't know. Did you guys get a notice of that? I didn't. But be that as it may, I think it's supposed to be around then.
I am signed up on Engage Bellingham, and this actually came out from the city, from Engage Bellingham.
Oh, did
So
it? Okay.
that's why I included it here, because they
Okay.
essentially said there is nothing on the Chuckanut page in Engage Bellingham that says this, but the newsletter that they sent
Oh,
out.
the newsletter. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think that is like roughly the.
isn't that the open house on March
Yes.
7th?
Yeah, but the comment period we're supposed to have like a press release announcing that Engage Bellingham is live and comments are welcome and all the information is out there to read. And then there will be the public comment thing on the 16th. So I didn't know if that date was set in stone yet, but I also wanted to let you guys know that since our last meeting, or maybe even one day before that, both Steve Wilson and Christopher Granis called me separately different times to ask what's going on with the master plan. And so I told them, I gave them roughly some information, but I said, go to the Engage Bellingham webpage and read the minutes of the meetings, of the steering committee meetings, and read the documents that are all posted there. And everything we know is pretty much there.
So Vincent, this commission has held a few public hearings in which we've received some fairly specific input from the public regarding, wanting loop
Right.
trails and wanting secondary trails that give you some sense of isolation. Has any of that feedback made it to the steering committee?
No, not officially. So maybe John and Frank, maybe we should, look at those results and make sure that they are represented, but not officially. You're right, John.
Yeah, I mean, because the public, to their credit, showed up and
Yes, they did.
they made a lot of thoughtful comments. A lot of it was about bikes and dogs, but it's also an awful lot about some of the very trail issues we're talking about.
Yeah.
So I think at least we owe it to our constituents to make sure that input gets included.
In the documentation. Yeah. Yeah. I'm not sure how you want to deal with that, but maybe John and Frank and I can talk about that.
I think we also have a written record of all
Yeah,
this.
well, we have to look in the minutes. And maybe pull those minutes up and ask the city to post them on Engage Bellingham.
That's a good idea, Vince. It's,
Okay,
I just checked the Engage Bellingham website. It does say that the public open house will be March 16th. Yeah.
oh, it does,
It's
okay,
on the website, yeah, on the particular page for the master planning process on Engage Bellingham.
okay.
Great,
Yeah,
because I didn't have it when I was doing the agenda a couple days ago, so.
Yeah, I think they're working on it. And as a matter of fact, Nicole asked me to write a blurb about the survey that we did back in October, that Saturday and that Monday. And so I gave her some, they have the date, they have the spreadsheet with the raw data, but I gave her some total numbers and whatever. So we'll see what she uses. And that's it. I don't know, John or Frank, you have anything else you want to add?
Just that it's definitely moving forward at a rapid pace.
Yeah. Well, we want that.
Yeah. There's I think it's useful. I think we might all want to just go look at that Engage Bellingham page. There's a specific page within the Engage Bellingham page about the Chuckanut Community Forest Master Plan.
Right.
They have pretty prominently said it's going to be online. It's going to be March 16th from 6:30 to 8:30 via Zoom.
Yeah.
And there's then there'll be a presentation to City Council during March as well. Although there's no date on that I saw, except just the month of March.
Definitely sure it's the 16th and not the 17th. I must have wrote it down wrong then.
That's just what it says there. That's I was just looking at it just now. That's real-time information straight from their site.
Do you want me to just send a brief notice out to the friends, just saying this is coming up? There will be a more formal press release, but if you want to learn more about what's been going on, you can go here, you can look at the steering committee minutes and do all that stuff.
I think that's a great idea, Robin. Thank you.
Okay,
Do that.
I will Okay, we'll do that.
Yeah, just like I suggested to Steve Wilson and Christopher Granis, I said, if you want to know what's going on, it's all out there.
Okay, response to the urban forestry plan letter. Have we received a response? So John wrote.
This is John McLaughlin's letter, right?
Mhm.
The city said that they were in receipt of it. I can't remember. The Parks Department said they were in receipt of it. This was a couple of weeks ago. And I believe that Nicole said they were in receipt of it and that they appreciated it. What they have said so far in response to it, I don't know.
I think they asked for some report on tree coring, which doesn't
Yes,
exist.
and we have nothing like that, and they know that we don't have anything like that. We've told them that somewhere along the line. Somebody told them. I don't know if I did.
I think you might have.
What there was the city arborist went and measured the diameter of trees to establish that it was a mature forested wetlands. That is out there.
Yeah, we included that in our letter to them.
Right. So that I think that's the only data that we have about that particular thing. And there was never a coring that I know of, unless the developer did it. Which
No, I
way?
think that was one of the issues. The developer's consultant wanted to do it, but I think it was the arborist pointed out that you don't need to do any coring.
Right.
Because diameters, you can do coring to get ages, but the wetland definition
It's by
uses
diameter.
diameter as a criterion too. And John Hymas himself mentioned that on our walk, saying, coring has potential impacts. You are poking holes in the tree, and that can be an entry point for fungal infections and all kinds of other things.
So I guess the simple answer to that question on our agenda is that we have had informal response that they haven't responded at all.
Correct.
Yeah.
I believe that's right.
Okay, and I think the way that that's particularly important for our discussion is that I think that plan would apply to this as the prime example of an urban forest. And so what they establish in that plan is very relevant to our interests and what we're doing.
It has, I think, two scales of relevance. So first, these are the documents that inform whatever plan they develop. So this is phase one. It's basically collecting baseline information. And if the baseline information is erroneous, then that undermines any confidence in the plan. Where that might make a practical difference is decisions about management of the Chuckanut Community Forest, but also of forest connections to the Chuckanut Community Forest. So if there are errors in classification of the forest and then the associated wildlife connections to the forest and in other areas, if there are areas and things that are so well known as the Chuckanut Community Forest and the Seaholm Arboretum, then areas that aren't as well known, errors might go without notice. And so, and then the decisions about management of those particular tree retention and that sort of thing would be ill-informed. So it basically, if we're concerned about the urban forest, then, and we ought to be, because Chuckanut Community Forest is part of the urban forest. It's a really important part, but it's also connected to other parts of the urban forest. Then we want a management plan that is well informed. And right now the baseline documents don't do that. And so that ought to compel the city to take action to develop a better set of baseline documents. And so we would hope for something more than acknowledgement of receipt of our letter. We would hope to see a substantive response to improve the baseline information they're working with.
Should I call the city and should I call the Parks Department and ask whether or not they are going to respond more fully to this urban forestry plan letter, the letter that you wrote? Should I just call the Parks Department and ask them?
Is
Should I
it
also,
Parks or
should I
Public
also call the
Works?
Parks Department and ask them to post the minutes of the last steering committee on the Engage Bellingham page?
Yeah,
Yes to number 2. What about asking Nicole and Lane whether or not they are going to respond more fully to John's letter?
Yeah.
The letter actually concerns work of Annalise Burns is
Yeah, it's
coordinating. and the
Public Works.
Department.
yeah.
Yeah. And that's one of the odd things about it is Parks and Public Works have different roles in this.
Well, as Annalise said, her outfit is basically the science shop for the city. And so the Parks Department would be relying on them.
So you want me to call Annalise and ask her if she's going to respond more fully through the Parks Department or inform the Parks Department? Who should I call? Give me some direction, John. Should I not call anyone? Let's have John Blethen call. Let's give Bob something to do.
Nicole said she was going to take it under advisement and get back to us. And then she never has, right?
I don't know that she said she was going to get back to us. I can't recall Nicole's response. I don't know where to lay hands on it. I'm sorry, I don't know that.
Yeah, frankly, I don't know what Nicole could really do because it's not her work. It's not her report. And, you know, eventually the Parks Department will be informed by the urban forestry plan that gets developed. But, you know, that's phase 3 and they're only starting to work on phase 2 now. And so, frankly, I'm not sure what Nicole could really do.
I'm not going to do anything unless somebody tells me. You want me to call Annalise?
Nicole did, I'm muted.
Nicole did agree to get back to us about it. I specifically remember that.
Yeah, she said city staff are reviewing your comments and will respond as soon as this review is complete.
You're reading that.
Yep, from
Okay.
the letter from her on January 25th. Or the email from January 25th.
That's my recollection. I'm glad you found that, Robin. I think that Nicole will follow up, and it's incumbent on her to do so because this was a serious letter from the board. I guess the question is, do we sit tight for another month and wait, or should someone contact Nicole and ask her about the status of their response? When might the board expect that? And any board member could do that, I think.
I think I better do that. I think I better call it in a very nice way, not on behalf of anyone. But just call her and ask her. We're just kind of wondering up here, you know, what the status of that response might be. And then I'll send an
I
email to
think we
everyone.
could ask you to formally do that for us though, John. I mean, I think we need to have it be a little more formal than that.
I agree.
Otherwise, what happens is that they're going to have these other meetings. The basic outline and guts of how this is going to happen is going to be laid down in concrete, and it's not going to change. I mean, or not be informed by better science.
I will formally do that. I will formally do that. Okay.
I think too, John, you could mention to Nicole when you contact her that this subject came up at the board meeting, and there was considerable discussion about it, and the board was wondering why it hadn't received the response yet, and asked you to check with her to get an update on when that response might be forthcoming.
Okay. Done. Okay.
Further thoughts? Is there other old business?
I haven't heard anything from John Blethyn. He's an old business.
It's true, John. I apologize. I had it on my little notes here to ask. You are the public, you and Mensa. So is there anything you'd like to share with us?
I think we're on a really short, am I on? Okay. I think we're on a short timeline here, and I am concerned about the secondary trails. And I think some of the things that you've noted, like the lack of a complete understory are really important. It looks to me like Parks is mostly going to close trails, and that's going to be how they approach the secondary trails. That I may be way off base there, but I'm not saying that they're necessarily going to reroute trails or spend the time to do that. It would be wonderful if you could involve Herrera in that, because they do have the expertise to do that. And I realize it's outside of the scope of Herrera, but what I think the city is going to do is basically take their little map that they've got that X's out trails and X out trails. And I'm not sure that they're going to take this master plan much farther than that. And that seems like really one of the most important components of the master plan. That's my take. And I don't know how, I don't know where what magic thing is going to reorchestrate where the trails are, the secondary trails. I don't think it's going to happen in phase 2. I think they're going to use the master plan as a master plan, and they're going to do the major trails. They're going to put some wayfinding in, and at some point they'll gradually work on getting rid of some of the obvious trails that we need to get rid of. But I'm not sure that I'm not feeling that there's a strong desire to reroute trails particularly. I could be wrong, but that's my take, listening to what's been going on.
Wonder if they'll have their wayfinding thing figured out by their open house. It would be nice to
Okay.
see what they're going to be signing, you know.
Sorry, I'm reading old emails trying to figure out who said what when.
Well, Hugh, to answer your question, if it's not on the if the signage is not on the Engage Bellingham site, by March 1st, or by the time they send out their press release that, okay, here it's done, here it is, the public is invited to comment, then no, it'll be after. I think we're done with all the business, no?
Yeah, I think that's it. So, and the upshots there that John is going to call Nicole and ask about a response. with whatever resources she can muster from Public Works or whatever about our comments. And John, specifically, we're interested in how that impacts the master plan. It's not just a interest solely in that Public Works document, but really how is that going to be used by parks in the master planning process or not?
Fair enough. I will let everyone know what kind of response I get. Would you recommend that I write this up formally as a letter, Dr. Carmichael?
I think it should be written. What do you think, Bob?
Yeah, I agree. The request was in writing. Ideally, it would be in writing, Nicole. We're kind of creating a record of it. And it's been long enough. That letter's been with them for well over a month.
Okay. It's going to be straightforward. I don't think that you have to vet it, Dr. Bob.
No.
It will be straightforward. Okay.
I don't feel a need to do that, John. Thank you.
Okay.
We trust you, John.
The hell you do. You're just saying that. Okay.
Is
All right.
there other old business? There's nothing else on our agenda right now. I think we have actually we completed all the additional business at the beginning of the meeting. So is there anything else for the good of the order?
Yeah, I've got a question about long-term maintenance and whether this board has some ability to require that there's some long-term maintenance. I can tell you that every park in town, every forested park in town is degraded at this point. If you go to Whatcom Falls Park, you'll see
Oh, yeah.
the incredible amount, the people pressure on all the trails is huge. So is there, I think, Frank, your interest in long-term, some kind of long-term funding is a very important component to this. Master plan is one thing, being able to implement it is another. And I don't know if there's some way that you guys have some leverage to guarantee that there's money set aside for this park. Because it's gonna need ongoing help. The pressure is huge.
John, surely that's going to be the job of whatever land trust takes this over, assuming that there will be a sum paid that. No, Frank is shaking his head.
I think that it depends on how you interpret it and what the agreement between us and them says, but I don't think that it's a foregone conclusion that would be part of the conservation easement. I mean, if the city would allow that to be in it, that'd be great. My hunch is that they probably wouldn't do that. So I think if we want long-term funding, we're gonna have to figure out where it's gonna come from and try to enshrine that in the process somehow.
I'll defer to our council, but I think any money or any funds that transfer to the land trust or any other easement holder is going to be to defend the easement. It's going to be up to the landowner to do the maintenance and to restore any impacts of violations to the easement.
If this is moving in the direction of keeping taxes going or keeping this parks board ongoing beyond the payment of the debt and the transfer to the conservation easement, I think you're going to run into problems. I hope you're not talking about that, although perhaps you should. I wonder, are you talking about that?
Well, my concern is that the Greenways levy is about up. You've got another year of Greenways money. And I don't think that unless we pass the Greenways levy or unless we do a citywide metropolitan park district, that there's enough money to support the park system that we have. These big parks that they're doing all over town are hugely expensive to maintain. When you start mowing fields and doing maintenance on sports courts, it is hugely expensive. And I would really like to see a spreadsheet on whether the city can actually afford to maintain the park system without either a greenways or a metropolitan park district. I guess, that's the obvious funding source for me. But I just was hoping that there was some little way that we could, guarantee that there was something built into this agreement that would say that the city will do X over the next 10 years or 20 years, because the money is going to really be tight, particularly now that we're doing an environmental program as well. We're doing there's a big push to do a program to deal with climate change. So
Didn't
balancing this
any
is pretty hard.
effective master plan anticipate, okay, what are going to be the ongoing maintenance needs of the place and come up with a plan to address those?
That's what I've been saying all along. We have to have that as part of the master planning process, or it's a waste of time. There has to be a plan for how you fund these things.
Mhm.
Whether it's building that trail into the wetlands and back out, that would be expensive, but I think necessary in order for people fully to appreciate what it is we preserved. And obviously the other maintenance costs are substantial. And it's and John, to your point, John Brown, I mean, I don't think we should rule anything in or out at this point. I think we need to keep open minds about it.
Fair
we-
enough. Fair enough.
And there's a political component and there's legal stuff. Legally, I defer, of course, to Bob, but I don't see any leverage that we have. If there is, Bob, can you speak up and tell us what it is to have?
Yeah, no, I think Frank, you have a good understanding of where we stand with it. The only thing I would, and you've articulated it, the only thing I would add perhaps to what you've said and also to what John McLaughlin's question has been is that there is, and there could be a bit of a fine line in the conservation easement as to when the city's responsibilities for protecting and preserving are not met to the point where they actually are obligated to take some restorative action to the land to meet their obligations under the conservation easement, even as it is written. That's not the sort of restoration improvements that we're talking about here, where we're looking for, maybe building boardwalks and doing other creative things to restore impacted areas and improve the ecological function. Having said that, there's room. Part of it will depend on how aggressive the land trust will be on monitoring the city's compliance with that conservation easement. So the bar is not as high as I would like it to be in the conservation easement. It would be great if we could raise that bar and put some additional responsibilities more expressly on the city that would be legally binding from what is in there now. That could certainly be done. My guess is, as Frank said, the city will resist that, and that will be challenging to get some additional language in the conservation easement. That's not to say that it wouldn't be worth a try if we have some specific ideas in mind. We could look at the easement, we could look at those ideas, maybe consider some creative ways of adding some additional language, which wouldn't be a non-starter with the city. I'm not foreclosing that potential. I think it's out there, but I am pointing out that I agree with Frank. There's challenges there. So my main addition here is to say that I do think there's an element of, shall we say, diligence with monitoring that conservation easement, which frankly could be better than what we've done while we've been in charge of it. That if the land trust wanted to look at it and monitor it and say, hey, we're seeing some degradation here from the functions. And at least we have a baseline report. And my concern is that that's what will happen. It sort of is what John Blethen has said about other city parks. I totally agree with what he said about the natural state of our parks. The good news here with us is that we're the only park that has a conservation easement. We're the only park that has a baseline study. And if the land trust is willing to enforce it and make sure the city doesn't allow degradation to occur, there are legal tools available to them to do that, even in existing conservation easement. And again, that's not to say we shouldn't look at improving it. I think we should.
So it seems like some of the work we have to do is political.
Yeah, I think so.
We all got elected to this board. And I think we owe it to the people that elected us to do the best we can to preserve this and protect this parcel of land. That's why we're doing the work we're doing. And if we, I think the first step would be a candid discussion with our elected leaders, our colleagues, our peers on the city council and in the mayor's office, and really try to find out what their intentions are. I mean, this has to be approved by the city council. And Nicole has a very tight timeline, a tighter timeline than honestly I'm comfortable with. I don't think we can do what they want to do in the time frame that they've given. They have their reasons for wanting to do it, but honestly, I don't think it's possible. Everybody will make an effort, and we can compromise where we want to compromise, and we can be uncompromising where we need to be uncompromising. But I don't think we just need to be a victim of circumstance. I think we can have an active voice and an active role in this. And I think the first place is going to be to meet with city council people and meet with the mayor to articulate our concerns. And after that, it's back to community organizing.
Can I ask your opinion about, well, how do we globally deal with the next greenways, or when the subject comes up of a citywide metropolitan park district? How do we think ahead about our stance on that?
I think we've shown that a metropolitan park district can work, even if it's just our little area. So, and there's other examples throughout the state that are even bigger and better. And we should, I think a metropolitan park district would be the better way to fund parks in our city.
And what about greenways then?
Then you wouldn't have greenways.
You wouldn't need greenways.
You could have the district, and then you could have rich people that wanted to donate some little thing in their memory, you know, but.
Did Kelly Linville want a metropolitan park district for the entire county or for the entire town? She did not?
No.
I actually talked with her about it, and she entertained the idea as a way to offload a bunch of costs that were hard to contain. But in the end, she didn't pursue it. I mean, she evaluated, she talked to me about it.
Does anyone know whether or not Seth Fleetwood has taken a stand on this at all? John Bletton?
Yeah, I missed the meeting, but I was told that he would go either way, kind of. I will say that Kelly.
That is so Seth.
I will say that Kelly was totally in favor of Metropolitan Park District, and she said at a park board meeting that she would come back. I don't know if it was from the grave or just retirement, to guarantee that we had a Metropolitan Park District. And I'll tell you why. It's because parks eats up a large piece of the general fund. And I am suspicious of a Metropolitan Park District because I suspect that the money is going to go to tot lots and it's going to free up money from the general fund. So if you do a greenways levy, then after 7 to 10 years, the voters look at it and say, oh, this was really a successful program. We got open space. If you look at a Metropolitan Park District, it's for life, it's forever. So I'm concerned that a Metropolitan Park District will become a park slush fund to take pressure off the general fund. That's me being negative, but yeah,
That's you being negative, but if some kind of, if it could be written in such a way that that did not happen, I gather that you would be in favor of it.
I would be more in favor of it if there was a guarantee that some percentage went to open space, and to complete the many linkages that are incomplete and do restoration on the property that we have, rather than more money for big formal parks with mowed areas and tennis courts. There'd have to be some kind of balance done. Currently, a lot of the money goes just basically to restoring buildings and doing maintenance. So only a small portion of the current levy, like 23% or something, actually goes to land acquisition. They feel that's enough money, but I can tell you, I've been involved in greenways since the beginning, and we're not acquiring property. We acquired virtually no property during Kelly's administration. Had she gotten it together, we could have a much larger community forest on the top of the hill up there, instead of a dying forest with mountain bikers running over it. But the politics of it, she didn't want it, and B, the politics of it didn't work out between the city and the county.
And also the money from outside coming in for bikes. That was another factor.
The problem was that the city and county were at odds, and so we didn't get any of the conservation futures money for that project. None of it was earmarked, and that was kind of a deal breaker when we would have had to pick up the entire tab.
Well, we've raised the issue, the kind of issue that Frank has talked about, and also John and John McLaughlin, John Blethen. We've raised the issue. Can we proceed any further with it? We're all more conscious of it than we were.
So I think one asset we might have is, this is the only park district in the city's history. And so our vote of confidence might mean something. But at the same time, what John Blethen is pointing out is, what is the true meaning of greenways? I mean, it's a concept with international application. And when he starts talking about, acquiring missing pieces and actually creating a network, you're now talking about the true meaning of greenways. And that's very different than mowing lawns or even acquiring manicured parks. I mean, both are important. And the city's population wants both, but the tendency is to do the latter and not do the acquisitions and the completing of a network that John's talking about.
Really, if you go back to the core planning documents, even from the state, about urban development and how you develop a city, it includes very clearly those arteries of plants and animals to keep the place alive. And that gets overlooked in many applications for development, where those connections and that vibrance of plant and animal life just gets put over on the side and not considered in those decisions. I think that we've come so far. It seems like we just have to finish this particular conservation effort. This is what keeps bioregions alive, is not cutting down all the trees and actually retaining the integrity of the ecological systems. If we fail, it is the failure of humanity against the onslaught of greed. And I
That
don't.
was a principal campaign plank for the mayor. That's one of the things he stood upon. But you're also, Frank, talking about a general principle of responsible planning. And you don't want cities that clear all the green space, that cut down all the forest. And so anyone who wants any connection with nature then leapfrogs and sprawls outwards, because then you have basically a monotonic spread of urbanity from Vancouver to Portland. You want to, and it's incumbent upon any kind of responsible planning to retain nature in the city and make the place attractive and livable and to residents, so they don't feel compelled to keep sprawling outwards.
Well, and then we can share our space with bobcats and cougars and
too.
more easier going animals than that, you know, maybe not kill all the deer with our automobiles.
I was looking at the 34th Street where they went underneath the freeway, both lanes, north and south, just a couple days ago with my son. And I mean, that is some connectivity there. You could come up Haddon Creek through there, you know, and you could, Godzilla could walk through there. It's so big. So
Yeah.
there's increased connectivity there for sure. I don't know what they're going to connect to. It's not much on the other side though.
Well,
certainly
it's
is.
part of the connectivity that we're trying to build, you know, that's exactly what we connect to. The cougars that are down there come right up the hill underneath there, you know, they're so at least I think we should begin to plan a political strategy of how we're going to get the city council and the mayor to share the vision. And I think they do, actually. I honestly think that they do. I don't know all the current council people, but I think we need to start reaching out to them and finding out where they're at and finding out and educating them about what these issues are. And
We need a leader. We need leadership. John McLaughlin and Frank James.
John Blethen's the one who got us into this. I think he ought to
And
take
John
it.
Blethen. All right, good night, you guys. Carry on. I'm going.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good night.
I
Good
think
night,
our,
John.
Peter.
thanks, John. Well, team, here we are again. This is the team. This is the core. We're the people that have been given the torch to carry. I hope we can do it. Bob, thank you for being here with us. Any thoughts you have about this at a pragmatic level, I would very much appreciate.
I think at a pragmatic level, the first person to start with is the mayor, because he's Nicole's boss. And one of the things we're concerned about is the speed at which this is taking place. And if nothing else, it would be good to educate him about some of the discussion we've been having and the concerns. They're legitimate concerns. And I think Seth would be receptive to listening. That's where I would start. And then I would go to the council. I think you're right. The council is important too, but I'd start with the mayor.
We could also leverage the forest to greater effect. Again, if you think of these ideas we've been talking about of restoring beavers to the big wetland and using that to mitigate the impacts of climate change. Right now, our comprehensive plan ignores climate change entirely, except for some rudimentary calculations of the additional carbon emissions resulting from the development. But it doesn't look at all at the impacts of climate change coming at us. And here we have a way of actually addressing that, of serving as a model for the rest of the city. And I think, again, given Seth's interest in environmental stewardship, I think that could really catch his attention.
So John, will you join me if I make an appointment with the mayor?
Sure.
Great, I'll work on it.
And just to inform you, I've already talked to him and shared him a bunch of resources about pollinator pathways. I know he's really interested in that.
In what?
Pollinator pathways,
Okay,
basically
you.
creating a network of flowering plants through the city to support native bees.
Sounds good to me. Is there other business for the good of the order right now?
there is one thing. Robin Albro is going to send a letter to me, to Hugh Beatty, and also to you, Frank James, in lieu of John Hymas, asking us to approve of things. She'll send that within half an hour, I guess.
And
I
we'll-
already sent it. I
You
sent
already
it
sent it.
early.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Robin's always ahead of us, John. You got to watch out for her that
Yeah,
way.
I'm
No,
watching
no,
out.
not really.
Good to see you all tonight.
All right.
I guess we have not declared the meeting over.
You know,
We have one-
something I've taken to doing since COVID, since I've watched it shorten people's lives considerably, is I tell people I love them. I love you guys. Really, truly, honestly, sincerely.
I love you, but I love you with reservations.
You always have, John. That's nothing new.
Okay.
But
I
thank-
love working with you guys, so.
Yeah, I like
Thank
you,
you for
Robin.
that.
I really like you. Better than anyone.
That's because she does all the work.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, thanks, everybody.
Okay.
I'm going to adjourn the meeting.
Right?
Thank you
Mike,
very
okay,
much.
John.
Thanks,
And
Frank.
we'll see you next month. And hopefully John and I will have something good to report about the political aspects of this by the next meeting. Thank
Right.
you.
Thank you,
Excellent.
Frank. Good
Thank
night,
you, Frank.
everyone.
Good night. Good night, everyone.
Thank you, Robin.
Good night,
night.
everyone.
Night.
Good night, Hugh.
Right.
Thank you.
Go home and study the manifesto, Hugh.